Hello, everybody. Welcome in Friday afternoon. It's snowy and gross outside, but it doesn't matter. We're having fun here in the Gorilla Sports Studio. I'm going to be joined by Meghan Angley in just a moment, but I do want to tell you guys about our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Trusted Americans, salary-based mortgage consultants, want to help you get a better interest rate and lower your monthly payment. Go to trustedamerican.com right now to see how much money they can help you save right now today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hey everybody, welcome in Friday afternoon edition Gorilla Sports Off Ice. I'm Jesse Montano. She's Meghan Angley. Got our guy Mark behind the glass today, making everything happen today. Meghan, how's it going? You staying warm?
Yeah, kind of. I sometimes dress in protest of the weather. Like, I don't care what it is outside. I'm going to dress how I feel inside. And so I think it helps to keep a positive mindset because I'm in a great mood, even though it's kind of flurrying and the wind is cold.
Well, I was actually going to say that you did dress for the weather with your Canadian tuxedo over there.
I do feel like a true Canadian. I'm not, but I feel like one. I really do.
Well, you look great. Look great in the Canadian tuxedo. We got a lot to get into today. Actually, I don't know if that's true. We got a few different things that we want to get into today that we kind of want to dig into a little bit. The Makars, and yes, that is plural. The Makars. And then Meghan, we had something earlier in the week on a show that we were just having so much fun on the show. We never actually got to the main part of the show. So we're going to circle back now that the Avs have clinched a spot in the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. We're going to take a little bit of a closer examination into how these brackets might shake out, who to keep an eye on, who to maybe not worry about so much on both sides of the bracket. But before we get into everything, it's Rockies opening day. And it doesn't really feel like a Rockies opening day outside because it's snowy and gross, but it's always a really fun time around the city, around Denver. And I just wanted to start real quick because we do have our Rockies coverage launching today with Susie Hunter, and our CEO and owner, Blake Rubenstein, is down there actually shooting everything. We got everyone in the Gorilla fam involved today, but just opening day stuff. It's just always fun this is always a fun time of year.
I have two friends that they call themselves meatballs. It's a reference to the Jersey Shore. Snooki and JWoww refer to themselves as meatballs, and they like to go and make the city their own on every opening day. And I saw Snapchat. They're out right now. They've been having a great time in preparation and celebration of Rockies opening day. And that's how it feels real, is when I see those little meatballs on Instagram running around the city causing chaos. That's how I know it's here, and I live for it through them.
Yeah, it's look, I'm not a huge, I've never been a huge baseball guy. I think them adding the pitch clock is one of the best rule changes that has been made in pro sports in a long time. It's moved the game along. It's made it more entertaining. It's made the games a little bit more realistic to sit through from start to finish. But this is always a really fun day. Just around the city, you can feel it, and it just does kind of feel like the official kickoff of summer. And that's what makes the snowstorm today so appropriate for Colorado.
And that's why I love that it's not stopping the real ones who recognize how fun this day can be. Rain, snow, sunshine, it doesn't matter. They're going to celebrate the opening day because baseball season is fun. There's no more beautiful a ballpark than Coors Field.
It's so true. It's so true. And I mean, again, so like I said, Blake, our CEO, we couldn't stop him from going today. We were like, Blake, we have other people that can go shoot this. And he was like, nope, he's a baseball guy.
I learned that on the way up with Mark.
Oh, really?
Like, he just likes baseball.
He just loves baseball.
Yeah, so he's inserting himself like by his own volition.
Right. And I have a feeling that it's a little bit of the opening day, what you're talking about. Like, the real ones feel the buzz and they just want to be a part of it. So, you know, fun sports weekend here in Colorado. And we had a fun game last night for the Colorado Avalanche that saw them kind of put a licking on the Columbus Blue Jackets a bit after a slow start. They were able to get there, settle into their game a bit. But Megan, what we're going to talk about from last night's game, because we did do a full post-game show, you can find it on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast audio only. If you want to hear our thoughts on the whole of last night, we're going to key in a little bit on something that we talked about in the second intermission, but didn't really give much time to in the post-game, and that is Cale Makar hitting 30 goals, becoming the first defenseman in the NHL to do it since Mike Green did it back in the 08-09 season, and is among a small group of NHL defensemen that have ever had a 30-goal campaign. We know how special Cale Makar is, but it's just yet another record that falls. I guess not a record, but another feather in his cap in what is still such a young career that I think we do lose track of that sometimes, that like he is like Cale Makar's got a lot of career left. Yeah.
And this part always, it feels dramatic probably to people outside of the fan base, but not to people inside of it. It's been the conversation now for a while that he's revolutionized the position and the way that it is played. And every time he unlocks some new record and reaches a new level in his personal game, I feel that more and more around Cale Makar. And it's not just elevating his game individually, but I do feel like if I were to sit down and really start thinking about young up-and-coming defensemen around the league, I describe them in shades of Makar and the ways in which they play a game that sort of similarly follows things that Cale Makar has perfected, mastered. What's the word I'm looking for? Because he continues to get better. So it's like that in talking about his ceiling last night, how I have no idea where it is. It's not even in the stratosphere. That's what this season has been like for Cale Makar. It's just yet another elevation in his game. And I don't think anyone thought that wasn't possible for him, but there's been some injury things that have hampered his game at the start of seasons. And even with that, it hasn't slowed him down from progressing as a player. You take stock then of his age and the runway that's still left in it. And I start to bigger picture think about too the front office and how aggressive they were around the team, making moves, not just around the deadline, but even well ahead of it. And I look at the year Cale Makar is having, and to me, that is exactly why. This is a special player in the prime window, and how long that window or how open that window actually is, I think is for Cale Makar to decide, because he just continues to take steps forward, and it's history in the making to be able to watch this player.
Well, my brain goes so many times, goes back so much to what Jared Bednar told us just a couple months ago when we were asking about how it just continues to pile up. And he said, look, we're watching one of the greatest of all time at this position. And, there's that meme that's been going around in the last few months. It's not really a meme. The first person I saw it on Twitter, and I've just seen people apply it to different things. And, I wish you knew you were in the good old days as they were happening. This is what we're watching with Cale Makar, is a season this year and a career that I really would encourage people to make sure that they stop and appreciate from time to time. This is special. This is something that when you hear, people talk about the nostalgia of watching Bobby Orr play and watching Wayne Gretzky play and, things like that. That's what we're witnessing here. Not only with Cale Makar, with Nathan MacKinnon as well, but Cale Makar is inserting himself into the conversation of the greatest player to ever play the position. I'm not saying he's there yet. I'm not saying, anything, but that is the resume and the career that he's building. And this is just another thing that it's like, yeah, you say 30 goals, and at face value, 30 goals is like, yeah, people score 30 goals all the time. But when you take the context of everything, it's yet another just incredibly impressive feat for Cale.
Yeah. When you look at the way the league is today and just the sheer size and skill in net, making things difficult. And honestly, too, the emphasis on defense around the league, too, teams trying for this, to have a defenseman score 30 goals. I think the fact that he is the first to do it in the last 16 years, was it?
2008, 2009. was the season. So
it was just
14,
like 15,
16 years.
16.
Excuse me. Yes.
And in the last 40, only 4 defensemen have accomplished this. He rightfully belongs in the conversation alongside a Bobby Orr, a Paul Coffey. Understandably, they are elite in their own right, and it's going to take many more years of Makar for us to start thinking about unseating some of those players, but he's in the history books already, right? He's every step of the way checking off the things to become that player who cements his place atop history in terms of how we talk about defensemen. Calder, Norris, Conn Smythe, Stanley Cup. It looks like he's in the running for yet another Norris, and he has run away with it this year because of not only how productive he's been putting the puck in the back of the net, but also just how sound he is in his own end and how that continues to be an area of growth for him as a player. I think too, I look at the goal scoring aspect and where this team has gone throughout the course of the year, the highs and lows that they've ridden, the struggle in net that they've experienced at times, and then the struggle in scoring goals that followed it when they resolved goaltending. It hasn't been a picture perfect season for this team, so you better believe it hasn't been picture perfect for Cale Makar. For him to, in the face of the adversity this team has experienced, have this career year says a lot about him as a player, because it's on the heels of another career year, in our rear view, that didn't end the way that the Avs would have liked it either. But it's a special team with special players.
People have probably caught on to how I view the sport and where the sport's at. For me, I don't need to see much else to start to put him in that conversation to unseat some of these all-time greats. But I know that I have a different perspective on a lot of that than other folks.
I certainly do too. I didn't get to live through that era of hockey and appreciate it to its fullest extent. And so I think that's what makes it hard for me to be an unbiased contributor in the conversation, because the era of hockey that I have gotten to live through has been the one that has watched young defensemen model their game after Cale Makar because of his impact on this sport. His fingerprints will be all over the way that hockey is played from here on out. And I think that's such a significant impact that I'm seeing in real time watching players like Zeev Buium.
Well, so I was just about to say, go. I know you love to go watch, just AAA practices on the weekend and just hang out. That's a deep cut joke. If you get that one, you've been watching Megan and I for a while.
I love Rampage.
But
and the Thunderbirds. I don't know why I didn't lead with that.
I was going to say, okay, I'm calling Jacob Slavin.
Fake fans.
But go to any youth rink right now for a hockey tournament on the weekends. Go to a AAA game. Like you said, go watch a college game. Cale Makar, shades of Cale Makar are every defenseman is trying to skate laterally like him. They're trying to open up their feet and move. Look at Sam Malinsky. You actually don't even have to leave the roster to see the effect that Cale Makar is having on defensemen.
They're the same age. Malinsky models his game after Makar. I'm going to say models carefully there, but he has directly totally commented on the inspiration drawn from the way that Cale Makar plays hockey.
100%. And it's just in the same way that a guy like Patrick Waugh changed goaltending in popularizing the butterfly and things like that. What Cale Makar is doing from the back end will shape the way that people play the position forever. He's one of those generational players that not only dominates the game in a way that we don't typically see, but actually changes it for future generations. And that's why I'm saying to me, I don't even need to see Cale do anything else to know that he is, in my opinion, he's not far off from me saying, yep, he's the greatest to ever do it. He's not that far off. And in the same way that it was a big deal for Nathan MacKinnon to finally break past the 100-point mark, I feel similarly as this for Cale, where It's not the end goal. It's not what he set out this season to do. But it will be something that we look back on in the not so distant future as it was a really significant moment in his career.
My feed's a little delayed, so I just saw the moment where Nate came into view on the camera.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. That was funny.
No, that was, we hijacked some of Nate's stuff. I looked over when I heard him talking, I was like, oh man, that is Nate's stuff. I didn't even realize it.
No, it's true. Joseph's comment, Cale has a ready shaped young defenseman. Look at Lane Hutson's game. He's totally a product of Makar style era of D. You go around like there was in my brain, I was like, wow, this would have been cool to prepare in advance of this episode. But I almost do want to take note of young defenders around the league who have shades of Makar in their game, whether they're consciously emulating him or not. Maybe it's a different conversation, but it's pretty clear to me a lot of the young defenders in this league have fingerprints of Cale Makar style hockey all over it.
100%. Sorry, I'm reading a text message. I almost called you Taylor. That was the other reason I had to stop.
I'd be honored. I'd be honored.
There's a Taylor on my brain, and it's not Taylor Swift, although Taylor Swift is on my brain
Common
a lot
mistake,
of the time.
yeah.
Right. But Cale Makar isn't the only member of that family making headlines in Colorado within the last few days. Taylor Makar has arrived in Colorado, former 7th round pick for the Colorado Avalanche, and really was a prospect that, look, just being honest, the first couple of years we saw him out at development camp was not really anybody that I considered at least a prospect worth keeping a lot of tabs on. I said, hey, he'll come through a few camps and maybe he'll one day be, grab an ECHL deal and play through a little bit there, but nothing really. But starting about halfway through his sophomore year, he really started to take steps and grow in his game until ultimately moving on from UMass, entering the transfer portal, going to the University of Maine, and breaking out into a legitimate pro prospect. And I remember we talked to Brian Wilsey each of the last 2 years, and he really said, yeah, this is a kid that we're suddenly keeping a much closer eye on. Well, after a massive breakout year for the Maine Black Bears, 6'4", 210-pound Taylor Makar does earn himself a pro contract for next year, but he'll be finishing out the year this year on an ATO with the Colorado Eagles. Megan, you went up today. You and Mark went up this morning to get an exclusive interview chat with Taylor Makar. We got some great shots of him on the ice. You can catch all of that right now over on the Grill Sports Twitter. It'll be on the Grill Sports YouTube here in just a little bit. Your first impressions of seeing him up close in real competitive type situations. Development camp is a lot of drills, a lot of emphasis on skating. We haven't been able to see him at Maine camp because of the NCAA. You've been following him closer than anybody since the Avs drafted him 4 years ago. What were your first impressions of seeing him today up close?
He belongs there. If you were to ask me after his first development camp, I wasn't sure what his trajectory would entail, if it even topped out at East Coast League, which sounds awful, but I didn't want to put a ceiling on this player because I felt so unsure of what I was looking at early into that first development camp stint. And I reflect on how that environment doesn't showcase every player's game the best way. And so where Taylor Makar did do better in the development camp environment was in the scrimmage, the burgundy white scrimmage. He even in the shootout scored a goal in one of the development camp years. And so I think what worried me then was some of the mechanics and his skating and his ability to keep up with pace. And in seeing what he's done from that moment to, all right, sophomore season, he starts to come into his own offensively, and he's playing with line mates that complement the style of hockey that he's meant to play. And so in a game setting, if you go back, you watch a couple of his games from the UMass era, particularly his sophomore season, or you key in on his last year with Maine, this is a completely different skater.
Yes.
He's explosive. And I think he surprises people because that was my impression of seeing him on the ice for morning skate with the Colorado Eagles. It wasn't that he surprised me, but just reading the body language of the players around him doing drills the first time together, there seemed to be this feeling of surprise that this player who has this obvious size and stature behind him, you expect a little bit of that power, but the mobility in his skating, I think, is what caught players off guard. And his battle, his compete, it's a morning skate, right? That's maybe not the environment that always comes through. It came through. And that speaks to me, a player who has really built out that power forward mold that he's talked about a lot now throughout college, that he needs to be to take his game to the next level and be a pro player. I think it's shining through now, even in a drill setting where it once didn't previously. And it's just the huge evolution of his game, because he's also applied the puck skill that you could see teased in development camp to in-game situations and scoring in big moments, to include 2 goals in the Hockey East title game. And I asked him about how he was able to mentally handle the pressure of that game. It's a bigger stage than he plays through on the regular season. And this is where the maturity of this player shines through too. And so 4 years of college for Taylor Makar is just another good thing to prep him to go to the Eagles and fight for a job to make an impact, because I don't doubt that he could help the Eagles right now, but there's a lot of guys who can help the Eagles. And I like that he has this calm under pressure that he demonstrated in the title game for Hockey East, in being able to score those goals in big moments, because I think that he's going to need to be mentally tough and mentally strong to fight for a job with the Colorado Eagles. Again, I think he can help them right now, because I do think his size and his physicality will translate well to the next level. I think there's also going to be a learning curve there as well. But he is going to have to earn a spot, because there's a lot of other players that are on that roster that can help in different ways. And I'm excited to see Taylor Makar continue to separate.
Well, and look, I'm even going to take it a step further in terms of the expectations and how do you deal with the pressure. Look, right, wrong, or indifferent, he's Cale Makar's little brother. And people and fans in Colorado have come to expect a certain effort, work ethic, leadership level from the Makar name. And that does, like I said, right, wrong, or indifferent, that does just add an extra layer of pressure to it. But from the times I've talked to him, the multiple times you've talked to him, even recently, the maturity we see in his game, the growth that we've seen over the last couple of seasons, I think this is someone who's equipped to handle it. Now, look, I don't know if Taylor Makar has an NHL future. I don't. I think he has one thing he can't teach, and it's size. The kid's big. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. That's right in the Mikko Rantanen range. I'm not going to say he's a great skater, but man, has his skating improved, and he moves well for being such a big guy. He also is going to be working every day with Cale to get better, and to be able to use that as a resource. When you talk to him today, just to give away a little bit of it, make sure you go check it all out. He referenced that who are a couple of the players that he models his game after. Val Nichushkin, that's a good one to model your game after. Logan O'Connor, that's a great one to model your game after. Chandler Stevenson, that's a great player to model your game after. I think he's got pro habits. I think he's got a pro mentality. And then I think he's got a couple of those things that you just can't teach people. Plus, I do think he has some of those intangibles when it comes to leadership and maturity and knowing how, being able to understand those high stakes moments. And I think he's going to be in a position to be successful. And I think this is a really exciting player for the Avs to be adding into their pipeline right now at a time where it's maybe been a little bit more depleted than we've seen in a while. And I think you're adding a really quality player that you can now get your hands on and have a big impact on what his development and trajectory looks like from here.
Yeah, the Avs have dipped into the college signings pool a little bit more. So there are other new faces in this rotation that are vying for even just getting a couple games in the final stretch for the Eagles. They have just 4 home games left in the regular season. And then outside of that, I think it's about 3 road games. So not very much left in the regular season runway to get some guys opportunity. And because of where this team is, this is going to be such a competitive environment in the playoffs for the Eagles. They've built a really solid culture and belief in that room with the group that they've had all year, that it is going to be hard then to make a case for a new guy just jumping into the lineup. So if you can make a difference immediately using your size, but using your speed, I think being 6'4", people underestimate the north-south forward speed that Taylor Makar has. It reminds me of Miles Wood. I think that we have different feelings around Miles Wood, the year he's had, what have you. But that's another player that I think if you look at how he can use his speed to give him advantages offensively, but also create a little chaos, add him into the player comps, because Taylor Makar is not going to be Val Nichushkin.
No.
And he's not going to be Chandler Stevenson. But there are elements of their games that he should absolutely be looking to. And honestly, I love the Logan O'Connor player comp because I do see a lot of similarities in the way that these players do play. Taylor Makar got opportunity, both special teams with Maine. And so I can see him being molded into a really strong penalty killer down the line in particular. And that's the kind of asset and toolkit that you want a player to have. And there's so many raw tools already in his toolkit too. You talk about a player like Sampo Ranta, who came in and he kind of had this similar fit, right? But he could never put all the pieces together. I think that's the benefit of having a player come in a little bit older, goes the 4 full years in college, and now has access to some of the best resources in Cale Makar, his brother, in having connections to players like Andrew Cogliano and Logan O'Connor. I think Taylor Makar has earned everything he's gotten on his own merit, though, in having access to those resources and using them and putting the work in.
Well, I mean, so that to me, that's the great part of pro sports. There's politics at all different levels of competitive sports, and even college. You and I were talking before they signed him last week, and I said, look, I think it took some guts for him to leave UMass. There's the legacy factor of it there. That's a good program that has championship aspirations. It's a little bit of a house that his brother rebuilt. And so it took some guts for him to say, no, I got to go carve this path over here. Not because it has, anything to do with Cale or whatever, but because it's what's best for me. And you can be a sibling, a parent, a son, all that stuff. If you're not good enough, you aren't going to play in the NHL. So, when you're talking about him earning it, what I love so much is that this is someone who does have, an advantage in terms of some of his resources, and he's making use of them, and it's helping him drive himself forward. And that's what I really like about, what you were just saying. We were just watching some of those highlights there from this morning. He looks quick. He looks mobile. And he looks determined. And what I like so much about the Logan O'Connor comp is it doesn't take anything special to do what Logan O'Connor does. It just takes working harder than everyone else. And that's maybe the hardest thing to do. And that's what's so impressive about what Logan O'Connor has done and what he continues to do every shift, every game, every month, every season. Logan O'Connor just works harder than everyone else. And it's shocking how many players that makes him better than. You know what I mean? And so Taylor Makar can take these awesome raw tools and put it together with stuff that Logan O'Connor does that is nothing but earning the next shift. I'm not going to put a ceiling on Taylor Makar, and I'm not going to say he couldn't make it to the NHL one day. He's got to start with the American League and try to earn his spot there. But if he can combine that work ethic, there's nothing that's going to stop him. That AHL roster is stout, and it's being led by someone who's being talked about in our super chat here.
Yay!
We've got a super chat from Bagley Sober. Cue the lights. There they are. We're back on the pod set. We got the super chat lights going. Jacob McDonald, record watch stress is real. Not only is Cale Makar in the 30-goal territory, Jacob McDonald knocking on the door as well. Shout out to our guy Vaguely for the super chat as always. But let's park a couple seconds here to talk about Jacob McDonald, Megan.
Jacob McDonald just one goal away from hitting 30 and reaching the AHL record for most goals in a single season by an AHL defenseman. But with 7 games left in the season, I'm expecting big things for Jacob McDonald to not only reach that goal, but to set a new one and make AHL history. It has been an incredible season for Jacob McDonald. He's been quarterbacking that top power play unit that has been inside the top 10 around the league all year because of how much of a threat it posed. But he's also just been a solid addition to the top pairing, holding down that decor and making this an overall good team defensively. Jacob McDonald, a leader on this Colorado Eagles group as well. There are so many things that he brings to the team. When I look at the success that they've had this season, again, they sit atop the Pacific. They clinched their playoff spot last week. This is a dominant Eagles team this year. I look at Jacob McDonald as a huge piece of the success that they've had.
Totally. Without a doubt. He's been great. Got a call up with the Avs a couple games ago. Precautionary, didn't get in the lineup, but assuming that the Avs keep going longer than the Eagles, that's a nice black ace to have in your back pocket.
Isn't it right? It's one of those break glass in case of emergencies you hope doesn't happen.
Right.
But the familiarity he has with the Avs and their systems, the way that they like to play, on top of the individual success he's had this year, that feels like a really good black ace.
I'm with you. Megan, anything else on the Makars? Cale's 30th, Taylor arriving in Loveland, anything?
No, I'm just excited. It's a special day. Like, this is just such a good family. Both these boys raised very well. And I'm rooting for the success of Taylor Makar. He's changed my expectation. He's surpassed it along the way. And I know I brought up Sampo Ranta, and maybe that caused people some PTSD. The difference is, along the way, it's been pointed out to Taylor Makar, different areas of growth that needed to happen. And then he has this breakout season at Maine. That's growth. That is a player taking the feedback and translating it into something real. And so I watched Taylor Makar in his first ever morning skate, receptive to all of the feedback that he was getting, learning on the fly. You know, these drills are being presented newly. And he is such a quick study that I have a lot of faith in what he can do.
Well, and the last thing that I'll say on it is people should remember how good of a league the American Hockey League is. We think about it in terms of the NHL, and we see players that get called up that don't quite fit in. This is a very good league. That's a legitimate big step up from what he was working with at the collegiate level, going up against at the collegiate level. But it's a good league. Put some stock into what he does there.
It's a good league and a good team. So even earning a spot is a huge accomplishment. And that's why with 7 games left in the regular season, don't be surprised if Taylor Makar doesn't play in every single one of them. And similarly, don't expect him to play even tonight. They're going to have to make tough decisions around the lineup moving forward, but they're keen to look at him too.
All right, Megan, this is where I turn the show over to you a little bit here.
I kind of forgot. Yep.
Because this was your segment that you and I opened a bottle of champagne and just kind of talked right through instead of actually getting to.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about some contenders, some pretenders here today on the pod, Megan.
Yeah. Well, dealer's choice for the first part. Do you want to start in the East or do you want to start in the West?
Let's start in the West, and we'll round out the day with the East and have some more fun.
Okay. If we even have time. We say this and then we get excited and we'll spend 29 minutes talking about the Winnipeg Jets. Just kidding. But I did want to start with the Winnipeg Jets because over the course of the regular season, you've been pretty adamant. It's a regular season team. They're not built for the playoffs. How do you feel about them? Just a couple games shy now of the end of this regular season. We're staring down playoffs pretty seriously now.
I feel the same way, I think. And I say that because this is a team who has entered that phase of where they're at as an organization. To me, that is cool. Go do it then. Go win a few rounds and go deep. To me, when I look at this team, they still just don't have that elite top end. And I think that's hard to get through multiple rounds of the playoffs, go deep, even when you've got Connor Hellebuck having the season he's having. I would just need to see them prove it, and they're likely to get a wild card matchup if Dallas loses a game between here and the end of the season. Winnipeg's likely to get a wild card matchup a little bit easier, maybe allow them to settle into the playoffs a little bit more. And maybe from there they can prove me wrong. But for me, I see this as a very, very good team, a tough team to play against on any given night, but over 7 games, I don't know. I just haven't ever seen them be that kind of threat.
Where do you think they are the weakest, that maybe you're less convinced of this being complete?
Top end talent. They just, and we saw it last year when Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen, when they shifted and went up a gear, the Jets just couldn't match it. They just couldn't. Connor Hellebuck looked overwhelmed. And again, he told us, I thought that was some of the best hockey I've ever played in my career. And he had a goals against average above 5. Josh Morrissey's a good defenseman. He's probably second pairing for the Avs. That's where I think they still just lack.
I think the top end talent is what I find a little bit unconvincing. And it's only because of the performances in the playoffs. In the regular season, the production is completely there to pose a threat from the top of the lineup. Yep. 38 goals, Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, 37 goals. I look to their players that I think have been maybe a bit miscast, that a Nikolai Ehlers maybe not used to his fullest potential. And so I think some of this was coaching in the series that we saw Winnipeg last year too, that some of the utilization for these players might not have given them the best chances. And then Gabe Vilardi, another player that I think highly of, but again, just top end to top end, like if I'm comparing it to the Avs, which feels a bit unfair to do just because of how the top end talent is in Colorado. But that is the type of comparison you do have to start making when you are drawing up playoff matchups. And that's where it falls a little bit short. I do think they struggled to get the goal support from the top of the lineup in the playoffs the way that they hoped. And obviously, goaltending was fallible in the playoff series. When you know Connor Hellebuck is really a great goaltender, it just shows how much the success of this team can hinder on goaltending. And honestly, that's true of any team, to be fair. It proved to be, though, particularly fatal for Winnipeg last year.
Right. And that's the part of it. That again, like, look, I haven't watched 77 Winnipeg Jets games this year. So, I'm not going to make a broad sweeping, generalization here about the way that they play, but it does feel like, Connor Hellebuck is the runaway favorite for the Vezina and is the current odds-on favorite for the Hart. When there's that much reliance on your goalie being MVP, that's just concerning to me, because it, as we saw last year, that can come crumbling down quickly.
Yeah, if your team is that reliant upon the goaltending for success, as we've seen too, like with the Avs, when they didn't have the right mix in net, even brilliant performances from MacKinnon and Makar and a power play that was clicking couldn't save this team from the goal support that was needed.
Right.
And that's where I think in play of hockey, it definitely gets a lot tighter. I see Winnipeg as a strong defensive team as a group that is going to make it hard to create chances. And I think the Avs initially had to fight through some of that. But I also think they found a good way around it, leaning on depth. And so I do look at the additions of Tanev to Winnipeg's depth, and then Luke Schenn on the back end to make it just a little bit deeper. But honestly, I don't know that depth was the thing that stood out as the biggest issue for me with Winnipeg. It was your best offensive creators need to be firing on all cylinders come playoff time. Yep. That will be the bigger question mark alongside goaltending. But I have a lot of faith in Connor Hellebuck. I really like him as a goaltender. So I'm not going to be so quick to say that's going to fall apart again, but there's still a few things that need to fall together into place for Winnipeg for them to still be a competitive team.
Yep, I'm with you.
So I don't know that I'd go as far to say they're pretenders at all. I think they're certainly still contenders. I think they're pretty complete. It's just a couple question marks at the top that will change the equation for me.
Yeah, I just don't know if they have to me, they are pretenders until they prove otherwise.
Okay, this is an interesting one that we have to be so careful about how we talk. But I want to talk about Dallas for a second too, because I think I've been hard on Dallas when we've been live on air. And the reality is I'm a little bit scarred of how Colorado's season ended in the Dallas series last year. Because I do think Dallas is a really complete and competitive team. And so it's not something I ever want to take lightly. But I also feel like with the addition of Mikko Rantanen, the pieces haven't fallen into place for his fit in Dallas as quickly as maybe they need for it to ahead of a playoff run. In a similar way that the Avs are looking at Brock Nelson, like, what version of you can we get you up to before we hit the ground running into the playoffs? And so I feel similarly, but maybe a bit worse about where Mikko Rantanen affects the bigger picture playoff equation for Dallas.
So for me, Dallas is a contender. They are. They've got great depth. They've got elite goaltending. And now for the first time, they've got an elite goal scorer that's under the age of 35. Who's not in his, the back nine of his career, whatever. I think this is a team that I've always felt Dallas is a weird fluky team in the sense of like, they just find weird ways to win games. It feels to me like it's been that way for decades. They just find ways to squeak it out all the time. They're great at finding ways to win. You got a good coach in Pete DeBoer. But in my opinion, and this is because of what you were just saying about how it hasn't felt like a completely natural fit for Mikko Rantanen there yet, I think this is their most flawed team yet, especially if you don't have Miro Heiskanen back for the first round. If you don't have Miro Heiskanen back for the first round, their defense is kind of a mess.
It's not strong enough.
Yeah. So to me, this is a contender because of the talent they've got, because of some of the depth they've got up front, and because of how good Jake Ottinger is. But I think if they want to get there, they're going to need some weird fluky things to fall in place for them.
Yep. I'm looking at Heiskanen as a huge part in the equation. I think Thomas Harley is a good young defender, but I'm not going to, in the same way that we don't want to see Sam Malinski in a top pair role for the Colorado Avalanche. I think that that type of responsibility for a top pair defenseman is really hard to absorb. And similarly, I think that Heiskanen is such an interesting conduit for the way that they create offensively. You know, this is a team that has been regularly now at the end of the regular season, at least, getting outshot. And they're still finding ways to put the puck in the back of the net. But as we know, when you look at the winning formula for a team, you got to win the shots battle. And you hopefully want to win the face-off battle as well. The Avs have proven that doesn't always matter, but I think the reason they load up, especially down the middle, is because they recognize the importance of that. And I think Dallas has depth down the middle, lines 1 through 3, a lot of young talent too. And that's where I wondered about the absence of Pavelski. I look at the value add of a player like that in the same way that we valued Cogliano on the cup winning team. And I just wonder if Dallas has enough of that represented in terms of maturity and leadership that can help to ground such a young and talented group, because I think they're very complete in the skill that exists in this lineup. And I'm also not sure about Ottinger, to be honest with you. I think he's just okay in the playoffs, and I like him a lot as a goaltender, so I'm not going to try to devalue him and suggest he's bad. I just don't know that he'll be the winning factor for Dallas, but I certainly think he will keep them in games and keep it competitive. But that's where I'm looking then when it's that tight of a matchup, which it could very well be if it is like a Colorado-Dallas series, then you need a little bit of the maturity, that component that forces you to dig deep and the types of players that stabilize you, and that's the one thing I don't know if Dallas has or not.
Yeah, like I said, to me, this is the most flawed version that we've seen of Dallas, even with the addition of Mikko Rantanen. Rupe Hintz is playing outstanding right now. But yeah, the Tanev's impact on the series last year was, I think, greater than people are giving it credit for. He really was able to neutralize a lot of the Avs top guys.
He's terrific.
So, like I said, I think I think they're contenders, but I think a lot of things got to fall in line for them.
Yeah. And, I think they're going to give us a lot of headaches and a lot of heart palpitations. So I don't want to undersell what Dallas is and how scary they can be as an opponent. But I think the Avs built themselves to be even stronger, to better match up with a team like that. And that's when I start looking at then some of the playoff tested players that exist in Colorado that have gotten across the finish line that give me a lot of confidence in sort of the mentality of the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, let's move over to Edmonton. I think I know how you feel about Edmonton already. I think they've taken strides compared to 2 seasons ago version of Edmonton. Obviously some injuries to top players, now a Draisaitl back in the injury rotation is concerning. But I'm also not counting on that being something that runs into the playoffs.
The Draisaitl one, if I'm Edmonton, I'm concerned about. Did you see what happened last night?
No.
So he fell a couple of times.
I'll look it up.
It was a non-contact injury. He was just kind of skating along the wall, and then you saw him kind of like bend over and reach towards his leg a little bit, and he kind of limped to the bench, sat there for a few seconds, and then left. Those are usually really concerning. Here's what I'm going to say for Edmonton. I have them in the pretender category for this season because this to me feels like the Avs year after the Cup for Edmonton, where you're just talented and good enough that you're kind of just keeping everything together, but it all feels like it's really fragile and about to fall apart. Calvin Pickard's their starting goalie. I love Calvin Pickard as a person. I would not feel great if that was my starting goaltender.
I see Stuart Skinner might be more day-to-day category in terms of injuries, so maybe not in the playoff picture as grave an issue. However, I mean, when we talk about goalies and depth, and we're like, okay, Mackenzie Blackwood, then Scott Wedgwood, then it starts to get scary after that with Trent Miner, Kevin Mandolisi. But the 1-2 you feel really solid about. Stuart Skinner as a 1 already doesn't feel super duper solid to me. So to have the 2 be Calvin Pickard, I think is where side by side, this feels like the weakest area for Edmonton. And this is interesting. You talk about how it's such a fragile thing, because when I think of the Western Conference Final, I viewed it as the Avs not getting Edmonton's best. Draisaitl felt like he was held together by rubber bands and you just weren't getting his best. And I think that greatly impacted the result. That is not to say that the Avs didn't hand it to them. They sweep Edmonton, but
with a backup goalie.
With Pavel Francouz. Throw some respect on that man's name. But I look at where they're at today and it feels similarly fragile. And it's a bit of a concern because at the start of the season, I thought, wow, they have a lot of depth at the top of this lineup in terms of options. Does Evander Kane get healthy? Now you've got a Jeff Skinner floating around. And this story has changed a lot for them, at least with how they're ending the year. And so depending on the significance of some of these injuries, I think it will change how I feel about the conversation. But it does feel a little bit fragile. Again, another one I won't underestimate because The area of weakness in years past has been defensively. I still don't think it's an area of strength for them, but
Right.
it is one that I think they've gotten better.
Well, and their team defense last year really did impress me, and that was what helped make me feel more comfortable about them as a team that could actually contend. But for this year in particular, I've got them in a pretender category.
All right, let's see. This is one I don't like to think about Vegas.
Oh,
but let's think about Vegas for a second. What's the reality with this team?
They are a team to me that they're a contender.
They're like a perennial contender. That's why I don't like to think about them.
What I was just about to say is they are, to me, not all that dissimilar to how we've talked about Tampa over the last 5-10 years, where it's just like, yeah, they are always in the mix. They always have a chance to win. And not only because of the team they've got and how good of a year Jack Eichel is having, but it's just the way they play. It's the way they play and the way Bruce Cassidy has that team motivated. By the way, all-time fumble from the Boston Bruins over the last handful of seasons behind the bench. No, Vegas, I really don't even have much to say about them. They're a contender, perennial contender, I think is a good way of putting them.
No, I feel similarly. Like sometimes I don't always know what they got going on over there because there's some moving parts, but they retain their depth so well year after year. They keep a lot of the key guys who are kind of the DNA of what the depth and the way that Vegas hockey is supposed to be played is. And that's impressive to me. I know there's been like circumvention rumors around the team too that also maybe help to keep that picture together.
I was going to say, but that's part of why they are the way they are.
Part of why they are the way that they are. And honestly, to be good at it, you see the result in just how complete the lineup is top to bottom. They're very sound defensively. Adin Hill has continued to be a good goaltender for Vegas, that I think it's the kind of team that can suffocate others because they're so deep line by line. They're going to cause problems. They're built for playoffs in that sense.
And then that building is a nightmare to skate into. That building is a nightmare to skate into.
That's a good call out.
If you're a visiting team.
I really like that a lot. All right, let's move over to the Kings. This is a team that my view of them has changed so much throughout the course of this year.
I've got these guys as contenders.
Easily from my book too, and it's because of the piece that was missing a year ago was goaltending.
Yeah.
And
you've got a Stanley Cup winning goaltender now.
I know it's easy to look at the save percentage and without the context of he was barely two-eyed, like he had one single functioning eye. And I think even when he returned to play in games, I don't think he was fully there.
Can I get the tight shot? He was doing interviews like this.
Darcy Kemper for those.
And he's like, no, I'm fine.
Listening. Yeah.
I can see. And it was like, bro, we can see that your eye isn't open. And it was just, it was just always so funny how much they stood back. He's totally fine. Yeah, no, I'm good. Seriously, I'm good. It was like, you're not.
And I know he lost out on the starter job in Washington. So, Kemper's an interesting goaltender that I think it can go up and down a little bit. But it's been pretty steady for LA this year. And given what we saw of him in the regular season with the Avs and even how he held it down in spite of an injury in the playoffs, I'm not going to dunk on Darcy Kemper and cast disbelief onto him.
He's always been a good playoff goalie. Go back to the bubble. He was lights out for a Phoenix, or I guess they were Arizona at the time, for an Arizona Coyotes team that had no business being in the playoffs. He got them through the play-in, and then they held their own against the Avs because of Darcy Kemper. Cannot underestimate him. Kings are contenders for me.
No, I agree. I think in the same way that I feel the secret to Vegas' success is how well constructed they are, because we were just critical of the Winnipeg Jets for like the top end talent. I just think it is so complete across the board for LA. I love the punch they pack down the middle, and I think their back end is also pretty solid comparatively. That's why it's easier for me to view LA as a contender, and they've got the experience of all experience with Kopitar at the top of the lineup.
Doughty as well. Yep.
Doughty on the back end, and then I've always loved Deneau down the middle.
Yep.
University of Denver, love Trevor Moore.
Hey, there you go.
Just wanted to say his name.
There you go.
No, just a part of the depth that helps to make that team complete.
They have the experience in Anze Kopitar up front, the experience in Drew Doughty on the back end, and the experience of Darcy Kemper in net. It makes for a pretty good group.
Yeah, we talked about like mentality, maturity, question mark with Dallas. Not wondering that with LA.
Yep.
All right, let's move over to Minnesota for a second.
I don't have anything to say about these wildcard teams. They are the pretenders of all pretenders.
Pretenders of all pretenders. Okay, if you have to pick who's the least pretendy of the wildcard teams.
Is that just the two that are currently?
So I'm actually including Calgary, St. Louis, Minnesota in this conversation. I even wrote Vancouver, but I'm going to be honest, I don't even believe in Vancouver.
Well, and what's funny is if the Canucks hadn't fallen apart in the last month, that would have been my pick.
100%.
But if you're going to make me pick between those three teams, I'm going to say St. Louis, and it's because of who's behind the bench.
Okay, you're pandering.
I swear I'm not. I swear I'm not. I don't think any of those teams have what it takes, but I think if there's any of them that could fall backwards into it, it's because of Jim Montgomery. And if you get 2019 playoff Jordan Binnington to just get hot at the right time. I'm not pandering because I don't believe in them, but if I'm being forced to pick between the three, that's who I'd go with.
I really believe in Monty as a coach. Does it change it at all if Minnesota is, let's say, 85% healthy, 90% healthy?
No.
Okay. Kaprizov.
No.
Boom. It doesn't change it. Okay.
No. Because I don't think any of those teams are good enough, period. Even if Minnesota's at their healthiest, I just don't think they're good enough.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I just really don't want to throw any backing and support behind St. Louis. So I'm going to say Minnesota is the least pretendy.
There you go. I love it.
All right. Let's move over to the East. I wasn't going to address the Avs.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, they're contenders.
Cool.
In my opinion, they are I know they're not the odds-on favorites out of the West, but to me, with the way that they're built, assuming health for all of these teams we're talking about, and assuming you're getting the best version of every team we're talking about, the Avs are my Western Conference pick.
I like it. We're an Avs podcast.
Yeah.
All right, Toronto.
You know what? Shout out to my guy, Harry, one of my best friends for 15 years. Huge Maple Leafs fan. I'm going to say they're contenders only because I believe slightly more in the goaltending this year. And Brandon Tanev is there. Chris Tanev.
Yes.
Chris Tanev is there. And I think that helps some of the back end. Now, they've got Carlo.
Yep. And Tanev now on the back end. And they've got Stanley Cup champion Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Now, look, that's like bottom pair defenseman, but can hold it down and be a solid option there. And so even if he's playing up a little bit, not so different in how we viewed a Lindgren, like, okay, he might be able to play up in the lineup a little bit as needed. This is an experienced defender. I think with Morgan Rielly at the top, I weirdly came to appreciate Toronto's back end, and that was not an area of strength in the past for me.
Yeah. And maybe it's unfair for me to say that Winnipeg's a pretender until they prove me wrong and say that Toronto's a contender. So maybe I put them in the same grouping as Winnipeg of like, I think you've got the pieces and the tools, but now someone go do it. I guess that's how I feel about the Leafs.
Well, and so with the Leafs, it's kind of like how I talk about Dallas and just being unsure if they have the guys with that mentality that's mature and will stabilize a group, just because of the struggles this team has had getting through the playoffs. And that will still be an issue for me. Do the stars on this team have the maturity to lead a group?
Right.
And I'm not sure just yet. They're going to need their best players in the regular season to be their best players in the postseason. And I think that's been a bit of a question mark round by round. It's like you might get your best out of Austin Matthews in the first round, but maybe not past that. So,
and I guess we've only gotten that opportunity to see that once.
Right. I guess we won't know.
But yeah, so maybe that's where pretenders till they prove otherwise, but I think they've got a lot of good pieces and I think they've got a lot of good tools, different from what we've seen in years past. They've got goaltending, they've got good D.
I like Joseph Wall. All right, let's look at Tampa Bay.
Similar to what I said for Vegas, these are perennial contenders for me. Andre Vasilevsky has had a renaissance this year. I just said it earlier this week or last week on the pod, I think he's the best, the greatest of all time in net. And when he is playing the way he's played this year, I do not pick against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I just don't.
The ads of Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand just made them stronger, and Bassey continues to be such a great goaltender. And
Kucherov is still Kucherov.
Kucherov is still head-to-head with Nathan MacKinnon in the points battle.
Jake Gensel.
Yes. I feel similar.
I like this team.
No, I that's why I don't like saying it, but I do like this team. Let's look at Florida, kind of a team I feel a little bit similarly about, to be honest with you.
I'd love a Colorado-Tampa finals rematch, just throwing that out there. I'd love it.
I think it would be one of the most entertaining cup finals. But another team that I think has stayed well-constructed. And the addition of Seth Jones is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was sort of this high-profile piece around the deadline for a reason. This is a player that can help the Florida Panthers. And then, of course, Brad Marchand. I think if that is a player that can help them over the course of the playoffs, they will be really irritating to play against.
Yep, these are contenders, tough to play against. Just quality on all four lines, like their D pairings. And Sergei Bobrovsky.
Just a question mark, like he's an experienced goaltender and has proven he can win.
Yep.
But there have been, postseason lows. Yeah, it's a high wire act for an aging goaltender, but there's so much good in front of him. Does he just need to be good enough? And it's fine.
They got to get Matthew Tkachuk back. There was a comment that just came through that Matthew Tkachuk is still out. They got to get him back. But if they do,
he's
contenders.
He's like, in terms of what Gabriel Landeskog adds to the Avs, he's like Landeskog light, because he's not necessarily one-for-one the same, but his compete and
he's the emotional heartbeat.
Yeah, the type of play that he is, the intensity that he adds, the type of teammate that he is makes you want to battle for and with and alongside him.
Yep.
And that's such a unique quality in a player that there aren't many that I don't really like, but I would love to have on the team that I cover. And Matthew Tkachuk is one of them for that reason.
Yep.
All right, Carolina Hurricanes.
Pretenders.
Look, I just can't help but look at the Hurricanes and feel like, we did this. We didn't do it, but I can't help but feel like the failure of the Mikko Rantanen trade, which I feel sympathetic for them, just kind of nuked.
See, I'll say this though. And you can ask Peter Baugh. I said this that weekend in New York when the Avs made the trade. The Hurricanes need a star.
Well, they got one.
Yeah, they did get one.
He is a Dallas Star now.
They needed an elite goal scorer, and I didn't think Mikko Rantanen was the right fit. I never did. They need someone who can go out and take over a game. And not that Mikko Rantanen isn't an elite player who can, dominate, but they don't have the high-end talent. Their goaltending is solid, but it is so literally fragile.
Yeah.
That you just don't have a lot of confidence that they can go through a grueling 4 rounds of playoffs. So unfortunately, this is a pretender for me.
I think this is a team that's close to being there.
They're perennially close, though.
They're perennially close. And this obviously took a step back for them this year because I think Ketchikov is a good young, emphasis on young goaltender, and Freddie Anderson is fragile, like you said. And
let me say this before we move on to the next team. You could sell me on the fact that this is a team just galvanized enough by the entire Mikko Rantanen debacle of nobody wants to be here and we're going to go show them what a mistake that is, that I could see them making some noise. But if I'm just purely basing them off of their hockey and their roster, pretenders for me.
They're really well structured. They're sound defensively. I love Jacob Slavin. I think seeing him on the World Junior. What am I saying?
World stage. I love that you didn't even say World Junior out loud. It was just in your brain, and you were like, seeing him on the World Junior. What?
World
Hot Juniors.
The world stage, the Four Nations stage.
Yeah.
I think everybody got to see why I love that player so much. But again, top end talent, like outside of Svechnikov, I just don't know that it hits the same. It used to be Netchus, and they didn't value and appreciate even him correctly. So let's move on from Carolina here. And honestly, we're starting to get to because there's Washington in this mix.
Yeah. To me, they are contenders in the same way that, like, I have them as contenders for this year, in the same way that I have the Oilers as pretenders for this year. I just think there's something special going on in Washington this year. And I think the way that they are rallying around Alex Ovechkin, I just not gonna pick against them. No one predicted this for the Caps. And it's special coming together here. So like I said, I have them contenders for this year alone.
Yeah, I think goaltending ended up being a huge difference maker, and PLD being
big time
a great fit. You know, his career before this, as a player, if we were talking contender, pretender, he'd probably be in that pretender conversation, at least if you interviewed his former teams. But I think that he has found some success in Washington. And then Dylan Strome, another player that I think got passed over kind of unfairly in terms of his utilization. There's still a lot of good left in that player, is being properly valued in Washington. And so I think this whole group has rallied around that. And then, of course, just the individual history book record chasing year for Ovechkin has been such a fun storyline to follow. And I didn't know how to feel about Chychrun at the time, like as an addition to Washington's back end, what kind of difference that would make. I actually think it did.
He's been outstanding.
Yeah, I actually think it did make a pretty big difference. So Washington, I think I feel similarly that if you asked me start of the year, I would have been transparent that I just didn't have a lot of belief in this group. After the year they had too, it was rooted in that information. But they've surpassed expectation in enough ways for me to believe they're on something.
Right. Yeah. Now, again, we'll talk again before next season, and I may not have them in anywhere near the same bucket. But for right now, for me, I think they're a galvanized enough group that I think they can be contenders.
I love the McMichael shade out because he was like chasing the goals lead in the league for a lot this year. And I was like, who?
Yeah.
I don't.
No.
Cool.
I remember that game.
That was cool. Okay, let's see. We're probably entering now.
I was gonna say that any of their wild card teams out east, they're bad. They're bad.
Isn't this a little bit frustrating?
Yes, when you look at what's happening in the West versus
side by side.
Yeah, the East is really bad this year. You have like 5 teams who are just trying to give away the wild card spots. It's like they don't want them.
I think the one that intrigues me the most is because of their fall from grace, and that's New York. The fall off that they've had also should be studied.
Yeah.
And it does feel like in this, they nuked their team, trading their captain, and I understand they needed to extend Shesterkin to make it possible, and that was a consequence. And honestly, he was just having a little bit of a down year and felt a bit like a scapegoat. And then the team didn't dramatically improve in his absence because I don't think he was really the scapegoat.
No, it just became a distraction. And yeah, I mean, you look at there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams that are all within what I would consider striking distance of that last wild card spot. In their last 10, 3-4-3, 4-5-1, 3-6-1, 5-4-1, 5-3-2. None of these guys want to make the playoffs.
It's weird because, you know, New York adds JT Miller, and that should be a pretty marquee piece, but I just think they offloaded too much. It hurt the vibes around the room in a way that couldn't recover.
It was too much change.
No matter how much they tried to replenish with talent.
Yep. I'm with you. All right. I think that's it.
That's it.
That's it for now.
We've covered it, and we're going to regret all of this when the playoffs happen and we're wrong about everything.
About every single team. But we'll keep checking in as we get closer to the postseason here. We'll kind of revisit this list as the picture gets a little bit clearer over the next week and a half. But that's going to do it for today. For Friday, we have Avs Blues tomorrow. We'll have content coming your way for that. We're going to have content coming your way from the Eagles this weekend as well. And like I said, Grill Sports, we're out at Coors Field today for Rockies opening day. Make sure you're checking that out. Grill Sports is up at in Boulder for CU Buffs Pro Day. We've got content coming your guys' way from all over the state of Colorado. So make sure you guys are checking it all out. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. Mark behind the glass today, making sure all of this comes together. That's going to do it, guys. Have a great weekend. Stay warm, stay safe, all that good stuff. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Take it easy, guys.